No, it's Greg Zerline.
No. Oh.
I don't even know these people.
You have my solemn vow. We are done at wide receiver.
Pemba said fold.
Till the next round.
This is sitting on top of my Scott Fishbowl trophy.
I have a cup for Cooper Cup, I guess.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome into Lightning Round. Of course, I am Kevin Tompkins with Andrew Cooper. Tonight, we have from Fantasy Life Newsletter, my fantasy newsletter compadre, quite possibly the most deceptively tall human on this earth, Mr. Sam Wallace. Sam, my friend, fellow Packer fan, how you doing?
My man, it's good. Deceptively tall. That's a new one. I'm gonna have to put that in my bio now. Like when we talk about athletes being like deceptively athletic, I'm just gonna have to put that I'm deceptively tall now and see how that works. At least until we all hang out again at the expo this summer.
Yeah, we'll have reasonable Kevin Tompkins, and then deceptively tall Sam Wallace. I love it. Mix it, put it right in there.
Do it for the brand. I love it. No, thank you guys so much for having me on. I've been looking forward to this. It's going to be a good time.
Absolutely, 100%. And Coop, it's really good to know that after 2 years, you still don't even know my last name.
I the best part, I think I just called you Thomas, dude. But how many times have I said it with an H in there? Like, I just brutal. I just texted Britt the other day and spelled her last name wrong too. I'm just so bad with that, man. I need spell correct on everything, Grammarly on everything. Just I need bubble wrap, dude. I need hand holding. That's what I need.
What you need is your fantasy alarm to like commission like somebody behind you to just correct you at every turn.
Just every step of the way, dude. Every time I bring up Evan Engram, be like, no, stop.
Exactly. Or this other guy who we will be talking about today, because we will be talking about plant your flag players for 2022. We'll be talking about some ADP from Underdog Fantasy. And of course, use promo code ALARM for up to a $100 deposit match on Underdog Fantasy.com. Doing a lot of drafts. The puppy is now open, $5 for your chance at the top prize, which is $75,000. Of course, Best Ball Mania 3 is going strong as well. So make sure that, you don't even have to join the tournaments. You could just join, a $3, a $5 Best Ball. I mean, can't beat it. So let's talk about some plant your flag players. We will let you, Sam, go first here. So who are you planting your flag on for 2022? Let's talk some football.
Yeah, when you sent me this show topic, I was excited because I feel like I've been doing quite a bit of research. If you follow me over on Twitter, just with some different players, a lot of wide receivers lately. That's where I've tended to. I guess I kind of found my wheelhouse with wide receivers, at least the last few off seasons. There's just so many of them, and as the league gets more pass happy, there's just so many options to study. First guy I'm going to go with, again, if you've been kind of following along with some of my stuff, might not be a big surprise, but I'm going to go with Russell Gage. Currently ADP per Underdog, I just checked before the show, he's going off the board at wide receiver 44. So right off the bat, he's already going later than his finishes over the last 2 seasons. He's averaged over 100 targets the last 2 years. And I know whenever a wide receiver switches teams, if you missed the news, he's going to be, at least to start the season, probably the number 2 target for Tom Brady and the Buccaneers. There's always a little bit of, concern of how effective a wide receiver can be or will be when you switch teams, but he arguably gets an upgrade in every facet. Upgrade at quarterback. The Falcons have been pretty pass heavy, but the Buccaneers were the most pass heavy team last year, and the opportunity, I think, especially early on, is going to be there because Chris Godwin signed that massive extension this offseason, but he's also recovering from an ACL tear, and I think there's an even odd chance that he starts the season on the PUP. So if he misses the first 6 weeks or is limited in any fashion, I think even if he's good to go week 1, the opportunity for Gage will still be there. And so again, he's going later than he's ever finished the last 2 years. He's been a good volume guy when called upon. And I even just looked over the second half of last year, over an 8-game sample from weeks 11 to 18, so about half the season, he was top 8 at the wide receiver position in targets, receptions, receiving yards, and target share. And yeah, you could argue that, he was kind of forced into that position, but he demonstrated he could be a volume guy. He could be a very productive wide receiver. And there's just a lot to like on that Tampa Bay offense. They pulled Brady back out of retirement. They're going to run it back. They're going to be one of the better teams in the NFC. Hopefully make a good playoff run again. And he's going to be a key part of that offense. And I think at wide receiver 44 prices, you can get a low-end wide receiver 2, high-end wide receiver 3 on an explosive offense. I'm all in there.
Yeah, I mean, not only does he get to start as the number 2 guy opposite Mike Evans, but when I look at teams and try and decide if the wide receiver 3 is going to be someone I'm interested in, the first thing I do is look and see what other personnel they have in terms of like fullbacks, second tight ends. Like if you look at a team like the Ravens, they use so many 2 tight end sets, so many fullbacks. Every time that, Patrick Ricard comes in the game, a wide receiver comes out. Every time Nick Boyle comes in, a wide receiver comes out. This team, not a fullback on the roster. And as of right now, not even starting tight end, right? Like we assume Gronk's going to come back. And if that's the case, then it's probably going to be to start Evans and Gage. And then even down the stretch, a lot of 11 personnel where he's on the field a ton. We saw Antonio Brown do fine in that role. We saw even with a limited snap share, Antonio Brown had the highest points per snap of any player in the league, even more than Cooper Kupp or Deebo Samuel. And the real big thing for Russell Gage, for me, is that Tom Brady routinely ranks among the top quarterbacks in the league in time to release. Like when you look at the PFF has the stats, it's like he's number 1 pretty much every year. Last year, Big Ben, with no line, just running shotgun was number 1. It was some close to 2 seconds. He was literally just catch and throw. But Brady was number 2, right? So this is a guy that gets the ball out quickly, and that plays right into Russell Gage's hands. So, I mean, and we're talking, what was the ADP you had there against him?
44.
I mean, dude, like, such an easy play for, like you go out and you pick your 3 starting wide receivers, and then you take this guy who can slot in your lineup at any given point and might even be in your lineup regularly. And then after that, you can just start shooting for the moon with just high risk, high reward guys, because you have that guy that can fill in a pinch. And, maybe not the sexiest guy, but like those picks are so important to like allowing you to do the things you want to do with the rest of your bench, right? Too many times I see guys, taking all risky guys and then they don't know who to start, or they take all similar guys and then, it's a nightmare deciding who to start. Like Russell Gage is a perfect guy to fill out a roster that lets you go and shoot for the moon with like the Sky Moores and all these other guys.
Yeah, and I wanted to take a look to see how well 3 wide receiver sets played out for Tampa Bay last year. So weeks 1 through 6, we essentially had Godwin, Evans, and Brown all on the field at the same time for weeks 1 through 6. Brown missed week 3, so that's the only game kind of missing of that sample size. So you essentially have like a 5 or 6 game sample. Each of those 3 wide receivers on the field at the same time, they all averaged over 5 receptions, over 7.5 targets, and over 15 points in PPR scoring. And that was even with Fournette getting 4 targets a game and averaging 16 PPR points. So the volume is there. I mean, they averaged 46 passing plays per 60 minutes of football last year. So there's just volume. And I'm not saying, Antonio Brown = Russell Gage. I'm not saying that at all, but just the opportunity is going to be there. And I think Gage is an above average possession guy. So he's a cheap way to volume with opportunity for significantly more upside.
Yeah, I like him definitely at his price point. I mean, you're talking about a guy who, is split pretty much inside outside. He's pretty much thought of as a slot guy, but he pretty much played, I think it was like 52 to 48 outside and slot. So, I mean, it's a guy who's going to be versatile. Once we get Godwin back, he can certainly mix and match into the slot there. But, I mean, on a basically what was a skeleton crew in Atlanta last year, I mean, that guy pretty much propped up a 30% target share from week 11 on. So, I mean, Russell Gage, I mean, where else are you really going to get? I mean, we're going to talk about him. Trust me. There is another receiver that can command a pretty high target share that we're going to talk about. But yeah, Russell Gage, with the amount of volume that this Tampa Bay offense is going to produce, possibly without Godwin, who knows about Gronkowski. But I mean, Russell Gage is just into a ready-made situation with Tom Brady and Mike Evans. This guy could be the volume, Mike Evans hasn't really been the volume earner, but Russell Gage could absolutely be the volume earner and just pay off his ADP immediately. And then, once we get the health from Godwin, see what's going on with that. Maybe Gronkowski doesn't come back and we're rolling out Cameron Brate. I mean, Russell Gage is going to just be a great, great bet at his ADP.
For sure, man. And people think this guy's just a slot guy. He actually played more snaps out wide last year than he did in the slot, right? Yep. Like he was in that situation already. That's why you can imagine they're pretty comfortable bringing a guy in to fill in for Godwin that just last year had to do the same things, right? Lineup, flanker, slot, whole deal, whatever you need.
Yeah, and if you want to kind of put a bow on the Russell Gage argument, Tom Brady reached out to him. And Russell Gage thought he was getting punked at first when it's like, hey, it's Tom Brady. I want you to come play for the Buccaneers. So I mean, if you're into that narrative, I mean that's all I needed to hear right there. If Tom Brady wants him, he's gonna get fed.
I love a good narrative, dude. The only thing I love more than narratives are rumors that are like almost certainly not true, but I still like to believe them. I love a good narrative. Like I love like the college coach gets it player, like a college quarterback with the wide receiver. And anytime it's like handpicked, sign me up, my man. So I'm putting that rumor right in my back pocket. I love that.
Didn't quite work out with the Matt Rule, Robbie Anderson. That narrative was sunk right away.
Or the Terrace Marshall, Joe Brady, because Joe Brady got fired right away, but I still loved it. I still love it now.
Apparently they're all all the sunk narratives happen in Carolina, but
that's right. This narrative is legit though.
Yeah. Coop, what about you? One of your plant your flag players.
So everyone would expect me to pick Evan Ingram, so I did not pick Evan Ingram here. I went with a different tight end. I went with Hunter Henry, right? And when I look at tight ends from when I really like break them down and look at the individual players, because you have to take into account three different things for tight ends. You need to take into account their own talent, the scheme, and the opportunity, right? It's not like a wide receiver where you just talent rises to the top and there's always at least two on the field, sometimes three, right? Like that's the thing with wide receiver. You can just bet on talent. In these situations with tight end, you need the talent, the scheme, and the opportunity. This is a guy who lines up at wide receiver a good chunk of snaps. He wins in man-to-man situations, there's certain guys like Robert Tonyan and Dalton Schultz. Very few of their catches come in man-to-man. Their success comes more as an ancillary piece versus Hunter Henry, where 40% of his receptions or so come against man-to-man, where he was able to lead the league in touchdowns for tight ends because he can beat his guy man-to-man in the red zone. Like that's the type of player that we want to see, right? And we've seen this offense, even without Josh McDaniels. I tweeted out earlier that the best tight end season of all time in fantasy football came with Bill Belichick coaching a team. Josh McDaniels wasn't even part of that. I don't see why in a second year, people like Mac Jones, they like what he does, that they can't grow that relationship, and Hunter Henry can't be as good, if not better, than he was last year. Now, the scheme, they do have him block on some pass plays, which I don't love, but they line him up at wide receiver, which I do love. And opportunity-wise, this guy was top 2 target on the team last year. I don't see why in a situation where they spread the ball around, do a lot of different things, he can't be one of the top couple targets on this team and lead the team in touchdowns once again. This is a guy where underdog best ball, he's going outside the top 12 tight ends. I think tight end 16 or 17, depending on, whether people feel like taking Cole Kmet first or after him today or tomorrow. I think right now he's tight end 19, going after Kmet and Njoku. I mean, you have in underdog, especially his underdog season right now, use promo code ALARM. This is a situation where you have to take at least 2 to 3 tight ends. We've seen the numbers. You need at least 2 and sometimes 3. You have to take at least a tight end 2. And this guy's going tight end 19. Anyone can have him. So plant flag for me. I don't see why, especially in best ball, where tight end touchdown dependency isn't that bad of a thing. He can't return big value at his ADP.
I think, especially that late, you want guys that can have that touchdown upside. I mean, he's maxed out in his career. He's never topped more than like 650 receiving yards in his career. But, we know he can be a touchdown threat. And I think having Mac Jones year 2, just a good, reliable weapon, hopefully that offense takes a bit of a step forward in his sophomore season at the quarterback position. I love it, especially that late. And we were kind of talking pre-show what some of our guys were excited for. When the price is that low, there's really no loss. There's really only upside at that point. And I think when you're that late at the tight end position, stacking a guy like that who can get you some touchdowns is a good way to go.
Right. Like, yeah, that's the whole thing is that you're not, I'm not saying you could draft him as your number 1 tight end. He's tight end 19. You could draft him as your number 3 tight end, but if you go out and get somebody like that is a target volume type player, like a Waller or an Ertz, then it's perfect to, throw in a touchdown guy. Because then you have the floor of the target guys, the Gesicki's and the Ertzes and the whoever it may be that you think can get consistent targets. Then you come back and get the guy where if he scores a touchdown that week, he's your guy. And if he doesn't, then you got the target guy in there.
Yeah. I mean, anybody going that late, I'm looking at the guys that are around Hunter Henry right now, and you're looking at David Njoku, Tyler Higbee, Noah Fant, Gerald Everett. I mean, that he just kind of pops off to me for tight ends in that range. With the guy's going to be running about at least about 70% of the routes. It also helps to have the guy that you paid $31 million guaranteed to be the best jumbo package tight end in the history of the NFL, Jonathan Smith. So, yeah, I mean, we'll see if he bumps up a little bit, but still, I think Hunter Henry's routes are pretty insulated, especially with, even you got Devontae Parker coming in, and you obviously got Jacoby Myers, but, Hunter Henry, we know how they like to deploy the tight ends there, and he's that receiving archetype there. Absolutely love him. I mean, like to your point, Coop, of course, the receiving touchdowns, you want to pair that guy with a volume guy. I mean, there's no reason why he can't be a rock star number 2 tight end, at least in an underdog build, or even, like you said, as low as a tight end 3. Yeah, Hunter Henry, the hen house will be rocking in 2022.
Right. Like, I look at some of these other guys and it's like, we want guys that are top 2 targets on their team, right? Every top 5 tight end in fantasy has essentially been a top 2 target on his team, besides Tunyon, who was 2 targets off the guy. And before that, Martellus Bennett in like 2014. We're talking pretty much all these high end guys are either leading their team in targets or at least being second. So when I look at this group of like, now all of a sudden you got like Pat Freiermuth, and it's Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, and George Pickens, and then it's Freiermuth. It's like, why can't Hunter Henry be that kind of guy? I don't mind in these best ball drafts waiting and taking some combination of like Kmet, Njoku, Henry, Ingram versus some of these guys where you're chasing a situation that has changed. Dallas I'm not sure if people noticed that AJ Brown's on the Eagles now, or Tyreek Hill is on the Dolphins now, but situations have changed, man. New information has come to light here. So this is a totally different situation. And for me, I would rather wait and get the value than draft guys that I think are in a very similar situation.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've clicked this button.
I've got information, man. New shit has come to light.
There it is. It's come to light. I'm telling you guys, it's like people are ignoring these trades as if they didn't happen, as if these guys now are not clearly the third target. Like, what are the targets for Mike Gesicki going to look like coming from Tua after Waddle and Hill? Like, if you like Mike Gesicki, then you must be drafting Tua in every league, right? I mean, Sam, what are your thoughts on a situation like that?
I think you brought up a good point, especially guys going around Hunter Henry that late. You talked about Njoku and a number of other players. We know what they are at this point. I mean, Njoku got paid. Good for him. I mean, that's awesome. Good for the man to get the bag. But we know who all those guys are around. Fant, Higbee. Fant was and still I think is semi-viable in fantasy, especially in Dynasty, because of his physical profile and things like that. But when we're talking redraft, we're talking underdog ADP. Give us the guy who we know has been a low-end tight end 1 who can score the touchdowns. And like you said, looking at how situations change, I'm all about, either the elite tight end or wait forever. Because the difference between tight end like 8 and tight end 16 is negligible. If you don't have a top option, don't buy the tight end 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, because it's all going to be the same. You can get better value in your drafts anywhere else at different positions. Just wait and stack those late guys, and I think you're in a much better spot.
Boom. Music to my ears, man. Music to my ears, because that's like my whole selling. That's like my whole thing, dude. Like, yeah. So I love hearing you say that. I'm going to clip that.
I looked at it last year or the year before, and it was the end of year points per game. Like, the difference between tight end 8 and tight end 16 was like less than 2 points per game.
Yeah.
I mean, so the tight end 16 could have caught 2 more touchdowns and jumped up to like tight end 7. Like, that's how close that position generally is. And the teardrop off the top end is so sharp, and then just flattens out forever until the end.
Mm-hmm. That's why I do a article every year called Yin Yang Tight End is a strategy, whereas you wait and then you take the best possible guy to start early season and you pair him with a high risk, high reward guy. And in past years, because there's certain guys out there, you can't trust them week 1. Like Mark Andrews, when he first broke out, Darren Waller, when he first broke out, you couldn't start those guys week 1. You couldn't trust them yet. So in order to get these type players, you have to go with a strategy like that, which is, for instance, this year, Zach Ertz is going to be the perfect yin tight end, the safe guy with Hopkins out, because, you can trust him for the first few weeks, but you still want to pair him with somebody like an Evan Ingram, where you can't trust Evan Ingram week 1 either. We don't even know what that team's going to look like. So it's like, you're playing right into my strategy here, Sam. I knew we brought you on here for a reason.
I'm all about confirmation bias. That's what I'm
That's
here
right.
for.
That's right.
I love it. Well, I'm going to talk about one of my favorite wide receivers to talk about here. Of course, it's DJ Moore. Anybody who with a pulse last year that followed anything on my Twitter or podcast, Lightning Round, of course, I could not stop talking about DJ Moore. And he just seems to fall through the cracks every year. And it really has to do with one thing: who is throwing him the ball. DJ Moore has pretty much everything else that you love. I mean, the dude almost gets almost a 29% target share, almost 40% air yard share, runs 90% of the routes, is on the field all the time. 26% targets per route run, almost a 2 yards per route run. I mean, everything is in place for DJ Moore to be an elite wide receiver 1, except for the quarterback. I mean, this guy has just been saddled with some of the worst upon the worst quarterbacking through after week 4 last year. I mean, Sam Darnold was just an abomination. The first 4 weeks were fantastic for DJ Moore. It looked like he was about to take that Stephon Diggs kind of leap, but and he's also produced in an even worse, believe it or not, quarterback situation in 2019 when they had Will Grier and Kyle Allen and Cam Newton. He was still wide receiver 16, average 15 points, fantasy points per game. So, I mean, we're hoping that Matt Corral can be that quarterback upgrade. Sam Darnold is still there for now, but we're literally just praying for that quarterback upgrade. And I think that is all it will take for DJ Moore to get some kind of stability, some kind of continuity. And then right now, I mean, he's going on underdog at wide receiver 16 right now. I think I would still take him over guys like Michael Pittman. I would still take him over guys like Jalen Waddle. I'd still take him over Mike Williams. I just don't think Mike Williams is that consistent. I just don't think that's going to change in 2022. So I still like him over Marquise Brown, Deontay Johnson. I still have him as a borderline wide receiver 1 right now. So I'm still on the DJ Moore train. He's posted 1,100 yards and averaged 140 targets the last 3 seasons. Just please, if there's any kind of God in fantasy football land, get this man a quarterback.
And you're so right, too. You're chasing all the right metrics. You're chasing the volume, the target share, the yards per route run, all of those things. He's just never scored more than 4 touchdowns in a season. And I was actually talking about this today about how unsticky touchdowns are from year to year, whether it's rushing or receiving touchdowns. It's the least predictive thing that we really know. We can chase a lot of metrics, we can use a lot of predictive things to figure out where guys will fall, but it's a big difference. Let's just say he goes from 4 touchdowns to like 9 touchdowns this year and he keeps that same volume. He's absolutely going to be a wide receiver 1. And I have heard several people over the last couple of months say DJ Moore is an above average quarterback away from being my dynasty wide receiver 3. And I think that's fine. If he had, let's just say Deshaun Watson, off the field issues aside, he were to go to Carolina and become the quarterback there. Yeah, it's, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, in whatever order you want. And then DJ Moore is immediately in that mix, 100%. It's just frustrating because he's, like you said, been saddled with some of the worst quarterback play ever. I even kind of forgot Will Grier was a thing until you just mentioned his name. So, yeah, he's a fine, safe wide receiver too, but the upside is obviously enormous.
Yeah, I mean, if we can get those touchdowns, man, he's basically going to be the reverse Brandon Cooks, right? Like, because that's what Brandon Cooks gives you. He gives you 1,000 yards every year, like clockwork. You know what I mean? And when he plays with Tom Brady or Drew Brees, he scores 8 or 9 touchdowns. And when he plays with Davis Mills, he scores 4, 5, 6. You know what I mean? And that's kind of where we're at with DJ Moore, is that like this guy is kind of the prototypical flanker in terms of 4.4 speed. He's got 6 feet. He's got all the size speed that you want. Clearly he's shown that he can play in this league. And I think they did a little experimenting in terms of switching him to like the deep threat guy and using Robbie Anderson underneath. And that was more of a Teddy Bridgewater thing. I don't think it really worked out, and it didn't work out well for DJ Moore, at least. I think they're going to go back to this guy being the focal point of this attack, as it should be. And we see dividends here. So I'm excited for, like, this is a guy that you can't miss on. I like him a little more in redraft than best ball, just because of the nature of a guy like this. You can take Brandon Cooks later as well, and they're kind of a similar guy in that sense. But in Dynasty and in redraft, it's like, this is a guy I put in my wide receiver 2 spot, and I just leave him there. because I there's no reason to, you're not going to move him up. There's no reason to take him out. Like, he's just a rock solid guy that you can depend on. So that's in Dynasty. This is the exact kind of guys I'm looking for in leagues where I start 3 wide receivers, because you start to realize in a 12 team league with 3 wide receivers, you pull up the rankings of the top 36 wide receivers. Those guys sitting at 35, 36 are not pretty. They did not have great years last year. Like, if you look at, pull it up real quick right now. The wide receiver 36 last year was like Van Jefferson was 35. You know what I mean? So if you're
when you throw in like multiple flex spots as well, if you have 2 or 3 flex spots in addition to your 3 wide receivers, it gets real thin real quick. Right.
And he's in your Tyler Boyd was wide receiver 31. You know what I mean? Right. Like, we're talking about, you don't even like the guys that are there. This guy's in your lineup. If you're a 3 wide receiver league, this guy's in your lineup every single week.
Oh yeah, he's set it and forget it. He's just. I hope we don't ever get to the point where we're like, that's just not going to be it for DJ Moore. I mean, we're 4 years in. He's got to produce, and I get it. I don't want to just say, whatever. It's the quarterback situation. He's obviously good, so I'm not knocking DJ Moore at all. But I hope we just don't keep having this conversation every year about, well, it was another wide receiver 17 finish, 1,100 yards, 6 touchdowns. We just want more.
Right.
But I mean, he was 163 targets last year, so the volume is there. He just needs to get in the end zone.
Right. And the other thing is that he's still young. He's like 25 years old. He came in so young, but he also signed the contract extension. So it's like, it's not like he can just leave after his rookie deal. He signed through 2020. I want to say 25, honestly. I want to say he's there. He's locked into that organization. So hopefully they can get him somebody to throw the ball, because he can't just walk out of there unless he pulls a DeAndre Hopkins or something.
Yeah, and he is the definition of Ben Gretsch talks about this all the time, being a small miss guy, where you're going to draft him, in and around, the teens and ADP, and he's not going to deviate too far from that, especially, with the consistency that Dude provides. But small miss, big hit. If he hits, if they get some quarterback continuity, if you get some touchdown, regression, there you go. He's locked in. He's a top 6 guy.
Right. You talk about the way you want to build your roster with a balance of like high risk, high reward guys. Like, if you have DJ Moore and Russell Gage, where you can get Russell Gage much later too, that allows you to start taking crazy stabs. Go ahead and take Justin Ross or whoever you want. You know what I mean? Like, go shoot for the moon, because at least these guys are going to fill out the lineup in those down weeks. So just something to think about when you're building your own teams. Once you make the first couple picks, that should dictate how risky or conservative you're being with your later picks.
For sure. So I know we're going to have Britt on. Obviously, Britt is a little under the weather this evening. Coop, you want to talk about one of the people that she added onto the list? I know it's one of your favorite people to talk about too.
Yeah, I'll take Zeke Elliott then. Yeah. So she put Zeke on the list, man. I've been a big Zeke fan for a long time, man. And this is just one of those situations where, it's so obvious why people don't like him. And it just continues to essentially prove them wrong. And even in best ball, right, where this is the argument I keep getting. I keep having people come to me and they say, well, he doesn't give you the spike weeks, and you spike weeks. Dude, you need to have multiple different types of players on your roster. The guy in Best Ball Mania 2 last year that came in second place. If you come in second place this year, you're winning $1 million. This guy, his running backs were Joe Mixon, Zeke Elliott, Trey Sermon, who is essentially a ghost, and Devin Singletary, right? He had 4 running backs. One of them didn't exist. Zeke Elliott was in his lineup 15 of 18 weeks, and one of those weeks was Zeke's bye week. So you're telling me that Zeke sucks for best ball, but this dude is sitting on $1 million? Like, you just draft guys on good offenses that are going to play and are going to score touchdowns. And before he tore his PCL last year, he recorded his fastest on-field speed since 2016 in week 4 against the Panthers. He's working out with some crazy guru, and he played through a torn PCL and was still RB7. I've never had some people be so upset about having a top 7 running back. It boggles my mind. I'm rooting for Tony Pollard. If your league has kick return yards, go crazy drafting Tony Pollard. I'm just saying that until Jerry Jones is done calling the shots there, Zeke Elliott is going to be the guy playing in the high leverage situations on goal line, on first down, on third down when, there's pass blocking implications. And Pollard can do end rounds and do all that stuff too, which is nice. But, Zeke is a guy that's in a position on a good team to provide value. And that doesn't necessarily mean he has to have 180 yards and 3 touchdowns for you to win $1 million like the dude did last year.
Yeah, I'm with you on Zeke. I think it's a classic case of, we often have this discussion of, well, player X is better in best ball. Or we only ever think of the ceiling and yeah, that matters, but you still got to score points. You can't just fill your lineup with Deshaun Jacksons and just hope for the best every week. You still need to have a floor. We kind of keep talking about roster construction, and Zeke is the perfect guy for that. I mean, I'm a Wisconsin guy, so I've never been a big fan of Zeke coming out of Ohio State. He's in the NFC, whatever. He's been great for fantasy. But I mean, his last 4 years of fantasy finish, RB5, 3, 9, 7. He hasn't had less than 65 targets in the last 4 years. I love Tony Pollard too, but Zeke's not going away, and he's an incredible pass blocker. We know about the injury last year. He's just going to be on the field a lot for one of the highest scoring offenses, and he may have even more opportunities for pass catching this year. I'm just curious to see how this offense is going to work with likely no Gallup to start the year, no Amari Cooper. We want CeeDee Lamb to take that elite leap into being, one of the top wide receivers in the game. But Zeke's going to be on the field a ton this year in a lot of situations, not just with Pollard. But yeah, he's undervalued, especially in redraft for sure.
Bro, RB1 6 years in a row. Most rushing yards over the last 6 years. I feel like I'm taking crazy pills here, man. When you rattle out, you just rattled off.
They're paying him. That's the thing.
He's not going anywhere.
You can argue how ridiculous the contract was for him just from a logistical team standpoint about paying running backs. But like you said, until Jerry Jones is not there anymore, Zeke's going to be heavily, heavily involved all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Looking at right now, he's RB17 on Underdog. I mean, I will say I'd rather have him than Cam Akers. I'd rather have him than James Conner, certainly with the mentor Darrell Williams there now. But that's John Daigelism, by the way. Anyway, but yeah, I mean, I think Zeke is still just criminally underpriced. For me, at least personally, it's a running back tier that I'm not getting a lot of, but I can understand how attractive, that guaranteed work in a great offense that Zeke Elliott's going to be getting. I mean, it all, the detractors, the Tony Pollard truthers, if you will talk about how it's, Tony Pollard is the metrics darling and has earned more work. I mean, we still have yet to see it. The money talks, and the money's going to Zeke Elliott right now. So say what you want. I think Zeke Elliott is still a value. I mean, I don't think he should be going in the 4th round by any stretch of the imagination, but I think he's going to be due for a little price increase here as we get later into the spring and into the summer here.
Oh, Kev, you're not getting a lot of running backs from that tier? That's absolutely shocking.
You know what? I'm going to tell you right now, I have done a grand total of 2 full-on 0 RB drafts. And
that's it?
That is it.
Yeah,
I've done a lot of
I'm sure these are all anchor, hero. Yeah.
I mean, that's the way to do it. Absolutely.
Yeah. But it's funny. I think I have 1 Zeke share of all of that.
Those are rookie numbers, man. You got to get those numbers up.
Got to pump those numbers up, man. Let's go.
Let's go.
I'm sorry. I've been drafting way too much David Montgomery. I'm sorry.
Another good cheap workhorse. 100%.
Exciting.
Yep.
Exciting.
Absolutely. Sam, so let's hop over to another one of your plant your flag players for 2020.
Sure. Yeah. This is the biggest disparity I've found so far in underdog drafts and even just in dynasty startup drafts for sure. Jacoby Myers. So we're going back to the Patriots here. Jacoby finally, there we go. Patriots run the East. I like it. I like it. Was allergic to scoring touchdowns through the first couple seasons in the league. He finally scored 2 last year. He scored 2 touchdowns, finished as the wide receiver 30. I mean, so he was very, very productive on an offense with a rookie quarterback. And the only real addition they brought in was Devontae Parker. And Devontae Parker's fine. I think the continuity that Myers represents with the offense, his role, and we know how valuable the slot role has been to that team for a while, even post Tom Brady era for that team. Rotoballer, I found, had a really interesting graphic that I pulled up. So Jacoby Myers ran 80% of his routes from the slot, and he scored 90% of his fantasy points from that position. So again, wide receiver 30 with 2 touchdowns. And that even includes that game in Buffalo where Mac Jones attempted 3 passes. So again, you can pull out outlier games, that's fine. I just can't imagine that he's going twice as late as his finish last year. He was even higher than wide receiver 62 the year before without scoring any touchdowns. He was the wide receiver 53. So he's still going later than, a 729-yard season with no scores. So I just can't fathom why. And I get there's going to be some ADP adjustment as rookies come in. Everyone's hyped up on the next crop of rookies. And yeah, that's going to push some established guys down. And I understand all of those things. But again, like, you're printing money at that point. There's no reason to not take a shot on Jacoby Myers at wide receiver 62 price in underdog, when I think his floor is wide receiver 3. Like, wide receiver 36 overall should be his floor. And he had like almost twice as many targets as anybody else on the team last year. I mean, Kendrick Bourne, produced. We talked about Hunter Henry being the touchdown guy, and that's fine. But you're just talking about volume, and depending on how you want to construct your roster that late, getting a guy who probably will be in your lineup as a wide receiver 3 or your first flex guy every single week, again, outside the top 60, it's free at that point for me.
Yeah, and it's like this is the exact same kind of guy, really, as Russell Gage. Where like if you're doing an underdog draft and you go out and you're feeling froggy and you take like a Christian Watson or like a Kadarius Toney and you need that like come back to earth player, like what. That's what will make you feel a little bit better about those high risk, high reward picks, is coming back around and taking a guy that got 126 targets last year, and the offense is not only set to be built the same, but Sam, I got a little rumor for you. I know we like talking rumors.
I'm all about the rumor mill. Let's go. Are they eating breakfast together?
Actually, that was Hunter Henry and Hunter Henry and Mac Jones on Nantucket, man. So I should have mentioned that with mine. But so this is actually not a rumor as much as it is straight from the player's mouth. Jakob Johnson, the fullback that replaced James Devlin for the Patriots. He was a international player that came over for the Pathway program. They asked him this year, and he said that the Patriots told him that they're not using a fullback this year. So they didn't need his services, and they kind of sent him off. So that is a big change, and we talked about that earlier, where that leaves more snaps, man. I mean, maybe they'll use Jonnu as a move tight end in that capacity at times, but that's just more snaps for Jacoby, Kendrick Bourne, like these guys. It's going to keep them on the field, man. As a fantasy football guy, I mean, I love the Patriots, man, but like their offense at times, it wasn't conducive to fantasy. And I see the way that they're shifting now and the direction they're going. I think it's a little bit better in that sense. It's like to a certain degree, I hate the Ravens. I like, Mark Andrews, and I like, whoever the top wide receiver is, Rashad Bateman now. But after that, it's because of what they do. It's so desolate. You know what I mean? It's you want the Rams. You want the coach to be like, these are the 11 guys. And if that guy gets hurt, this guy goes out there and he plays 90% of the snaps. Like, that's what I want. I want Riverboat Ron using 11 dudes until they're all hurt. So that's good for fantasy.
Like, I'm okay drafting boring players. I am. Like, I tend to be more of a conservative drafter anyways, probably to my own detriment in some respects. But I'm like, look, the guy scores points. Like, it doesn't have to be hard at this point, especially at that price point. I don't need anything flashy, especially in Dynasty or whatever format you want to play. I think we sometimes get too clever. We try to get in our own way too many times and overthink things. Dude scores points. Dude's in my lineup. Dude's cheap. Like, that's fine. That's all I need, especially outside the top 60 wide receivers.
I will fully admit on these airways that I am a ageist. I like the flashy. I'm a sizist. I like the alphas. I can't help it. But
you a big hand size guy?
Big, huge hand size guy.
Okay. Excellent.
Every Thanksgiving, I have these all up on my refrigerator. Just wall to wall. But anyway, we talk about boring wide receivers. Jacoby Myers is the boring wide receiver I'll happily draft.
Yep.
Like, we're talking about a guy that has he's always on the field, ran 92% of the routes last year, 23% target share in a perceived boring vanilla milquetoast offense. Like, Mac Jones is going to take another step up this year. Now they gave him another weapon in Devontae Parker. So you're taking some of this pressure off of, Bill Belichick. Is he going to be calling the offensive plays? Is he going to be having more of a say in what this offense does? I mean, right now, Jacoby Myers is your best, pass catcher at this point in the game. This is a guy that you have to feed. So I think he's going to get over touchdowns, like you said, they're not sticky, but I mean, Jacoby Myers has to kind of get over that hump at some point. If you're going to be a feature
Right.
player, if you're going to be getting that kind of volume, to be getting that low, touchdown totals, things have to break a little
Some
more.
regression
Right
has to be coming too. And even if you think like Devontae Parker is going to assume the wide receiver one role and command like the lion's share of opportunity, I still think you can't move Myers down that far. So like I don't think Parker is going to be that big of a threat to Jacoby Myers' workload. But even if you do think that way, I still don't think you can push Myers from his wide receiver 30 finish last year outside the top 60.
Dude, that Devontae Parker role, like I'm a big Devontae Parker. I liked him before he came here. I liked him more before he came here as well, because that role is not what people think it is, man. That role is like go out there and tether your foot to the ground so that on the plays where we
blocks
and just like eat jams and like think about like Demir Bird, man. Like that dude was out there just getting punched in the throat. Like that was his job, just so that we could have just one tight end on the field for a play, because you have to have 7 guys tethered to the line. Like N'Keal Harry out there playing split guard or whatever he was doing. Like at times that setup is just not conducive to high end fantasy production. And yeah, like Parker is the best one in that role, but like Belichick, I feel like he's got like a grudge against wide receivers. Like I remember a quote where he was like, why are we going to pay a guy that only touches the ball 5 or 6 times a game? Like he traded down twice.
Mohamed Sanu.
Yeah, they did. He traded a second. Yeah. But at the time, the Patriots were such a wagon that our second is like, if anyone else offered a third, like if we offer a third at the time, because our pick was, it's the same thing now with like, say the Bills. Yeah. Like if you're the Bills and you offer a third, anyone else's third is more valuable than yours.
Better, absolutely.
So you have to offer a second now. Yeah, so that's what happened. That's my explanation for that terrible trade that they did. But yeah, I mean, like that's just the way he's always been, man. So I really don't see a situation where Parker goes out and has 150 targets, or if anyone's going to have that level of targets, it's going to be Jacoby. Not even Hunter Henry, who I like. Like Hunter Henry for me, the high end for him would be like 100 targets probably, and he can work with that.
Yep. 100%. I'm going to talk about one of my guys here, and it's I'm going to dip in my toes into the tight end pool here. Talk about Dalton Schultz. Last year, Dalton Schultz ranked 6th among tight ends in targets, receptions, receiving yards, touchdowns, PPR points, and points per game. I mean, the dude ran almost. We love that benchmark of as far as routes run of 80%. Dalton Schultz was almost there. He was at 77.5% routes run percentage throughout the year, up to 100 targets. We all thought that Blake Jarwin is going to be that guy, or of course, Linda, we pour one out for you in your Blake Jarwin love, but it ended up being Dalton Schultz. And right now, I mean, we'll have Michael Gallup on the men. We've seen some stuff about he might not be ready until, October or possibly November. So right now you're looking at CeeDee Lamb, and then whether it's Jalen Tolbert, whether it's James Washington, Dalton Schultz can be the top 2 target on this vaunted Dallas offense for a majority of the year. I mean, that, and this is a guy that's going to be going, he's tight end 6 right now in Underdog. I think that's about where he should be going, but he's been climbing a little bit, at least in the last couple of weeks. I have him above Hawkinson. I think he's clear above Hawkinson when you're talking about tight ends in that range. Obviously, Goddard took a hit when AJ Brown was traded at the draft, but yeah, give me Dalton Schultz. I absolutely love being able to get a guy like that still kind of has that perception of being under the radar. He's not going to be that athletic, guy like a Darren Waller or Mark Andrews. He's probably more in that, maybe that George Kittle kind of range where, he's going to be out there too. He's always going to be out in the field. That guy, like I said, we want the top 2 targets among our tight ends, and Dalton Schultz can absolutely be that. And he's got a clear path. He could be that the full season if Michael Gallup's, injury woes or, James Washington doesn't impress, or Jalen Tolbert doesn't take to in his first year.
I was going to pick Dalton Schultz when you sent me the show doc talking about how, pick a couple of guys we're high on, and I saw that you already picked him. So, I mean, he was going to be in contention for me for this exact conversation. So you touched on everything. And I don't really think it's a hot take to say that I mean, Dalton Schultz could be the tight end 3 this year in redraft. So, I mean, normally I don't mind passing on those middling tight end options like we talked about before. Like once you get past the top 4, 5-ish, I'm fine waiting. I'm okay taking him at cost, even a touch earlier. I would, would be like Kelsey and Andrews for me as the top 2 in redraft this year in whatever order you want. But then give me Dalton Schultz as the tight end 3, ahead of Pitts, ahead of Kittle, clearly ahead of Hawkinson for me. He did what he did last year with more competition for targets. And I get the whole there are too many mouths to feed narrative, but guys that are good are going to earn targets. And he's Zach Ertz. He's not uber athletic. He's not going to wow you with yards after the catch, but he's going to be heavily targeted, a great possession receiver. His yards after catch are not going to be great, but they don't have to be just because of his role in that offense. And I love the continuity there. I love that Kellen Moore came back to Dallas just from a fantasy perspective because, yeah, his offensive game plan has been skewed. Sometimes I think he's been kind of outcoached in the second half of games for how their offense tends to run. But I think for Dak and having just that continuity of his coaching staff, being down Amari Cooper, likely Michael Gallup, yeah, like you said, top 2 targets on his team, Dalton Schultz, absolutely.
Yeah, like I said, I mentioned it earlier. I'd love to see him take a step forward as far as like beating guys in man-to-man situations. But now he's going to get an opportunity to play more slot, play more wide receiver. Now that they're down Amari, and to the point as far as Gallup goes, like we've actually seen guys like Robert Woods out at OTAs, which aren't even mandatory. They recovered. Jerry Jones came out and said that he doesn't expect Michael Gallup to be ready for week 1. Something along those lines of like, we need to prepare to be without him. There's absolutely no reason for him to come out and say that unless he truly believes that's the timeline. Like these guys always want to say, we hope to have him or nothing, or you just say nothing at all. For him to come out and say, we don't think he's going to be here, that tells us pretty much everything we need as far as what his timeline's looking like. So,
and usually negative news at this time of the year means more. I mean, because everyone looks great. Everyone's in the best shape of their life. Everyone's catching on to the playbook sooner than they did. Mm-hmm. But when it's negative, especially with an injury, yeah, that raises more flags than not.
There's no reason to say it too, because it's like, if you really think about it, there's, where it's still technically 3 months out. So he could have easily just said, we don't know, we're hoping to have him. Instead, he said, we don't think we're going to have him. So that tells me that it's not likely. So you were talking about CeeDee Lamb in a new position where he's getting the highest level of coverage. No Amari, rookie Jalen Tolbert, James Wishy Washington, and and then of course Michael Gallup when he gets back. So for me, he's definitely in that situation. I see no reason at ADP to draft Darren Waller or George Kittle at this point.
Right.
I'm just not doing it. George Kittle, man. Not only does he block on 15% of his pass plays in that offense, but he quietly has been dropping a lot of passes. I usually don't even care about drops, but he hasn't been the guy that he was, and this is a guy who really needs those monster touchdowns to be the guy that he's been because the volume isn't really there for him. What's been propping him up is these crazy 65, 70-yard touchdowns that he's had multiple of, more than any other guy by a lot. He's had like 8, and the next closest guy has had like 3. Travis Kelce and Zach Ertz haven't had like a 50-yard catch in half a decade. You know what I mean? Like those guys are volume guys. Kittle, he doesn't get the volume, and I don't think he's going to get, you can't really bank on those plays. So for me, I'm not super interested in him. Like you said, I'm interested in Schultz and Hawkinson, and then after that,
wait for your boy Hunter Henry.
I'm waiting, man. I'm not taking Goddard. I'm not taking Knox, Ertz, Freiermuth. I mean, that whole group there, Gesicki. No.
And kind of your last point about Gallup too. There's incentive for the team to not rush him back. I mean, they paid him. So I kind of view Gallup and Goddard in the same way. They both got good contracts in the offseason with the teams knowing they were hurt. So I think that says a lot about how they feel about them long-term and how there's zero incentive to try to rush them back because they're a heavily invested player at this point.
Bingo.
Coop, you can either go with yours or I can go with Britt's.
I'll do mine, and then we'll talk about Britt's after. So figured we got to round out, there's four positions here, unless you guys want to talk about Kyle Juszczyk. So we got to talk about no. Okay.
The zero. Hey, you know what? He just made one of the zero RB lists on Fantasy Pros. That's all I'm going to say.
Wow. That's super exciting. I'll make sure to definitely check that out. If you have a league that is a mandatory fullback slot, he's got to be the best one, right?
Fullback one.
Fullback one, FE1.
Next to Alec Ingold.
Yeah, but I'm going to talk about a quarterback here, and I'm going to talk about Derek Carr. Now, I'm not at all concerned. I mean, you hear what they're saying. I'm not at all concerned about Colin Kaepernick. I'm not concerned about the, any packages or any issues like that. I think Derek Carr is going to be starting quarterback for this team. I trust Josh McDaniels to put together a good offense here. And when you think about Derek Carr, this is a guy that has fairly consistently been up there in completion percentage. You see it in the Scott Fish Bowl, which is full of industry leaders, sharp people, drafting this guy super high because that format has penalties for incompletions and positives for completions. Derek Carr in the format like that is killer, right? And that's a situation for this guy where he's always had that ability, right? He's always had a decent quarterback rating. He's always been a decent player. They've been trying to get this guy weapons, and essentially, they bring in Antonio Brown. He freezes his feet off and calls the GM a cracker, right? Like, just completely ridiculous, right? The guy's gone. They draft Henry Ruggs. That guy's in jail. First round pick in jail. They draft Brian Edwards in the third round. They had to trade him away. They draft Lynn Bowden in the third round. They have to trade him away. Their best player during this whole period, the best two players in this whole period are Darren Waller, a guy who washed out of the league on substance abuse and came back, and then friggin' Hunter Renfrow, who looks like friggin' Dustin Pedroia. He looks like a pen salesman. I mean, it's like, what is happening? They finally bring in Devontae Adams. This guy has a real weapon, a guy he's familiar with, and he gets to keep these other two guys who he basically made stars. I mean, he made Hunter Renfrow wide receiver 10. I imagine Devontae Adams can do pretty good with this guy, right? So for me, if we like, if people seem to like Hunter Renfrow still, they seem to like Darren Waller. If we like Hunter Renfrow, if we like Darren Waller, if we like Devontae Adams, you have to like Derek Carr. I sent a tweet out the other day. The last time a team had two top 24 wide receivers and a top 5 tight end was 2013 Broncos, and Peyton Manning threw 55 touchdown passes. Do I think Derek Carr is going to do that? No.
Absolutely.
But I'm saying it right. I'm saying it right now, and you can clip it. No, book it. 55. I'm saying that if you do like all those players, if so facto, Derek Carr shouldn't be QB 15.
Can I add some fun stats to back up that Derek Carr take? Because I am totally on board. So here we go. Over the last 2 seasons, Derek Carr has been among qualified quarterbacks 7th in passing attempts, 7th in completions, 6th in passing yards, 4th in completion percentage, 11th in passing touchdowns, and 11th in passer rating. I mean, so he's top 12 in every major quarterback statistic, essentially.
QB1 across the board, all stats.
Yeah, I mean, he's been the perfect. Like I was talking about, Derek Carr and Kirk Cousins are the perfect quarterback 2s in Superflex, and they're fine streamers in one quarterback leagues. Like they're fine. Like if you just want to totally go like zero quarterback in a redraft league and just take Derek Carr at the end of your draft or Kirk Cousins at the end of your draft. Maybe not this year because they're probably going to be a little bit more pricey than, taking them last round. I mean, these guys are perfect for that. So yeah, absolutely. I'm totally with you on Derek Carr.
Right. You reverse engineer it with these guys. So it's like the way I look at it, like if I'm going to be the guy that takes Jalen Hurts, or Trey Lance or something and try and be that guy that shoots the moon, I'm also going to
Kevin Tompkins.
If I'm going to pull a Kevin Tompkins here and take Jalen Hurts at QB9, I'm going to turn around and take Derek Carr or Kirk Cousins as my second QB, and then know that I have. Kirk Cousins last year, his passing numbers, just passing, were like identical to Josh Allen and Aaron Rodgers, like not that far off from those guys in terms of across the board numbers that you care about for the pass catchers, right? Like, obviously it's the rushing that moves the needle on those guys. So if you take somebody risky early, like Jalen Hurts, Kyler Murray, come back and take one of these other guys. And I'm doing the same thing the other way around, where if I take my first quarterback is Matt Stafford or Aaron Rodgers, then I turn around and I take like a Deshaun Watson or a Tua or Justin Fields, and I try and do it that way. Same thing we talked about with tight ends. Like, give yourself a chance, grab somebody that you can trust, and then give yourself a chance to at a league winner.
I'm not gonna lie, I am slightly disappointed in you, Coop, because you failed to mention one of the biggest narratives in the entire offseason the neighbor narrative for Devontae Adams and Derek Carr now.
Go on.
They are literal next door neighbors now.
Bro, that's the same thing as Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, where Jamar Chase
Do you not
was like,
see the picture of them in their cars together in the driveway?
No, I
Like-
did not see this. Are they like
Like
legitimate
4 or
next door
5 days
neighbors?
after that trade.
what?
Like that is a real thing. That is
Derek Carr,
the
quarterback one,
hashtag
55
neighbor
touchdowns. Book it.
Did he do the same thing that Jamar Chase did, where he just walked up and down the street asking people if he could buy their house until someone said yes?
I'm not sure how that whole thing went down, but they are next door neighbors for sure. I mean, he only threw 23. He was well below expectation for the amount of passes that he threw. He was, I believe, 7 touchdowns below expectation. So he should have had his first 30 touchdown season since 2015, the year that we were thinking. I think that was the year he was at least in the MVP race. But yeah, I mean, with the weapons that he has with Josh McDaniel now, they have to tailor some kind of plan for him because, I mean, Derek Carr, he threw for 4,800 yards last year. Like I said, most interceptions he's thrown, but he is a rock solid with the weapons that he has. Darren Waller, Devontae Adams, Hunter, certified public accountant Hunter Renfrow. There's no reason why Derek Carr can't be flirting with QB12. And then if he gets the touchdowns, if this offense keeps going the way he went last year, why he can't go even further.
I forgot why would I even ask that? Devontae, with the contract Devontae Adams got, he could have bought the whole street if he really wanted to. You know what I mean? Like, what is $140 million? So yeah, I'm sure he had no problem getting whatever house he wanted in that neighborhood.
Yeah, for real. Yeah. So let's go. Britt had one more running back, and it's a running back that I happen to be on, and that's J.K. Dobbins. So we know that the Baltimore Ravens failed in their quest to try to get Melvin Gordon, but J.K. Dobbins is coming off of injury, the one that he suffered in training camp. Certainly, we know running backs tied to mobile quarterbacks. It's very, very it's not good for any kind of receiving work. And J.K. Dobbins never really got that anyway. But looking at what they did, they traded away Marquise Brown. They didn't really replace him with anything else in the offense. They drafted a couple, mid to late round tight ends and Charlie Kohler and Isaiah Likely. So it's looking like, that 11% spike that the Baltimore Ravens had in their pass play percentage last year, that might be coming back down a little bit. And I think this offense is going to be a lot more run heavy than we're going to get shades back into 2020. So can that benefit someone like J.K. Dobbins? Absolutely. Even without the passing game work, I still think that between him, Gus Edwards is still on the mend too. Lamar Jackson, I mean, I still think that there's a lot of room in this offense for a guy that, J.K. Dobbins is a big play waiting to happen in this offense. And you add volume into that. I don't think that the split between him and Gus Edwards is going to be so pronounced. Even if J.K. Dobbins is getting 62-65% of the runs in this offense, I still think that there's absolutely multiple ways for J.K. Dobbins to pay off RB21 in this on underdog and in this offense. I really, really like J.K. Dobbins as one of my later round running backs. We're getting into the third round, getting into the fourth round, where I will draft 3 wide receivers or draft 2 wide receivers in the tight end and then pick up J.K. Dobbins as my RB1 that can absolutely get into that top 12. I mean, there's no reason why he can't be.
Yep, I'm in the same boat. You summed it up, and I think that to your last point, that's where I really fall in line is your roster construction. He represents someone who I am more than okay with my RB1, depending on how my first couple of rounds go. So if you really load up early, whether it's wide receivers, you go 2 wide receivers and an elite tight end, however you want to do it, I'm very much okay with Dobbins being my RB1 based on the roster that I'm probably building at that point.
Yep. And like this guy, when you think about all the stats that makes us like guys like Nick Chubb and like guys like Javonte Williams especially in terms of best ball specialty, breakaway run rate, like that's this guy. Like he was obviously hurt last year, but the year before that, his breakaway run rate was silly. It was like 40%. So like 40% of his carries, he's running for a first down. You know what I mean? Like this guy has that innate ability to bust off big runs. The between the tackles guys. I know Gus Edwards, he's such an interesting anomaly with his size. At his size, 5.2 yards per carry or whatever it is per career. But I don't think that's going to hold them back from being, the team that they can be, the run heavy team they can be, that actually broke a 40-year-old record. My Patriots, 1978 Patriots, something like that, had the record for most rushing yards in a season as a team. And this Ravens team with these players broke that record. So I don't see why this team can't go back to doing that. It's what Greg Roman was born to do. Like, that's all he wants to do. Last year, Greg Roman was probably the most uncomfortable he's ever been, having to actually throw the ball every once in a while. So I'll be very interested to see what Dobbins looks like. For me, I like him better as in best ball, at least, when I have somebody safe. Like, so he's an upside guy for me, like a spike week guy. Like, this is a guy, if you look at the last game he played, it was like the ultimate spike week. It was like, what is it? Like 200 yards and 2 touchdowns or something crazy like that. Like, he's capable of monster runs and monster games. So when I take somebody safe early on, like say I take Aaron Jones, I turn around and I'm like, okay, let's take some juice here. Like, let's take J.K. Dobbins or Travis Etienne. Like, that's the kind of player he is for me, where I'm like, okay, I have somebody safe. I need to take somebody a little spicy here. And I think that Dobbins can definitely get you those spike weeks. And that's all it takes really down the stretch is you got to make the playoffs and then weeks 15, 16, 17, get some spike weeks. And this could be that guy easily.
Yeah. All right. Well, those were our plant your flag players. Of course, Sam, thank you for coming on, my friend. Let us know where we can find everything you are doing right now.
Yeah, thank you so much again. This was a good time. I appreciate you guys both for inviting me on. And over on Twitter at @SWallace_FF. And you can find all of my work now just right over at the Fantasy Life newsletter. So at MB Fantasy Life on Twitter, I believe is technically the Twitter handle. I feel like I should know this more specifically, but yeah.
MB Fantasy Life.
Yeah, at MB Fantasy Life. There we go. I got it. So yeah, obviously, Kevin, you and I are doing a lot of work over there together. So I'm very, very excited for what is going to be an awesome offseason. There's a ton of things going on behind the scenes that we know of that we're slowly kind of starting to feed out to the community. But otherwise, yeah, check out the free newsletter. It's literally free. You will find a ton of content that is going to be moving to, I believe, every day of the week pretty soon, delivered to your mailbox bright and early every morning with a ton of stuff in it. And it's cool. And there's website coming as well. I'm very, very excited. So very thrilled and humbled to have my opportunity to be over there doing a lot of work, and we'll see how it goes.
When we have Matthew Berry on, I'm telling him that you forgot the tag.
Well, here's the thing. I got it right, and then I second guessed, but I was right the first time.
All right. We like to play tricks. You know what we should have did here? We should have picked terrible players for Brit and then just bashed them.
That's right.
Next time, we should have been
like Marcus Valdez-Scantling, like rock on.
Brilliant
Let's
signing
go.
by the Chiefs. Packers should have let him go. But anyway, well, thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, man. A lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And speaking of Matthew Berry, we will be having him next week. So we're going to be talking about exactly where it's Fantasy Life week in the next 2 weeks. So, of course, that's going to be an earlier start. That is going to be 4 p.m. Eastern time. So we will be on a little bit earlier than your typical lightning round stream. So of course we'll be pumping that up big time for the talented Mr. Roto himself. So for Andrew Cooper, I'm Kevin Tompkins. Of course, for Mr. Sam Wallace, you can find him at the Fantasy Life newsletter. Find me on there as well. Go subscribe because it's absolutely 100% free and there's no reason for you not to subscribe to the Fantasy Life newsletter. We're doing some great work, ramping up. It's going to be a fun off season heading into the season. So what are you waiting for? Click off of this, go over there, sign up right now. We will see you next week for Mr. Matthew Berry. Again, for Coop, for Sam, I am Kevin Tompkins, and I will say this because Coop got to do it last time. Toodles.